This is Amy Chan from CakeDecoratingSchool.com, and if you like cake decorating, you're in the right place. Welcome to our flower series. In this video, we're piping buttercream hellebore flowers. The video is broken down into segments, so you can rewatch, rewind, or skip ahead as desired. So we're using American style or simple buttercream, and we're using several liquid gel colors today. Some neon bright pink, violet, red, royal blue, and finally, just a little bit of lemon yellow. We're going to start by making our pink, and it's going to be a shade of mauve. So I'm just going to start with a nice drop or so of that pink, and then I've got a tiny bit of purple out on my little lid here, and I'm just going to give it a nice little speck of that purple just to create a nice little mauve shade. Adding a tiny bit of purple into some pink is a great way to create a nice little shade of mauve. And if we've gone too purple, you can always add some more pink in there. I actually think that's a nice, lovely color. Especially once I get it mixed around a little more, it's really gonna even out and get that pink all evenly distributed. It's gonna be beautiful. So now that we've got our mauve, which is gonna be the majority of our petals, I'm just gonna move this to the side, and I'm gonna make a tiny bit of darker color. I don't need a lot. This is just to stripe my bag for the center of my petals. So I'm just going to pull a tiny bit over to the side. I'm going to add some more purple to that, some more pink, and also some red. And then just give that a nice little mix around. Just over here on the side of the cup. I like these big cups because you can mix multiple colors in them and keep them separate because they have nice big open mouths. I just want a nice darker shade that's going to give me a bit more of a burgundy vibe, and I think that's going to do it once it's all nice and mixed around. These flowers often have two tones on the petals. I think it's a really nice touch. The other thing you get while mixing them in the same bowl is it's easy to compare those colors. So that's going to be lovely. I've got my two shades for my petals there. I'm going to put this to the side and work on the colors for my centers. So I've got a little buttercream down in there. I'm going to take just a speck of yellow. I want to create a nice light color for some of the centers. I want to have a touch of yellow, but I don't want it to be too bright or too present, and just like a nice, beautiful, buttery shade. I think that's going to be perfect. And then I also want just a touch of green as well. So I'm just going to pull a little bit over to one side, add a little bit of royal, just a tiny bit, and then just to make it a little dull so it goes with the rest of what we've got going on, the tiniest little speck of purple. And this should give us a nice little shade of green. As a second color for those centers. And if they don't have enough difference, you can always bump the color up on the green, but I think that looks lovely. We've got a nice little bit of green, a little bit of yellow there that we're going to use for our centers. So to create this flower, we're going to use 3 12-inch disposable decorating bags. We have them fitted directly with the tips. And with our mauve and burgundy, we're using a large 123. You can see I have that burgundy color striped towards the fat end, and then my mauve color towards the skinny end. So that means I'm going to have lighter outsides, darker insides to those petals. I've got my green in a bag with a number 2 tip. You could use a 2 or 1, so just a plain round tip. And I have my yellow in a bag with a 3 tip. So also plain round tip. You just want to make sure that the yellow is a larger size than the green. So let's talk about the techniques we're going to use to create our hellebore flowers. For the petals, we're using our 123 tip. The flowers have a slight cupping usually on the edges of the petals, and that's why we're using this curved one. However, we're going to hold it in a nice little flat position. So the center is going to be, the fat end is going to be right there at the center of the nail. I'm going to line my opening up with this kind of angle, and if we think about it as a clock face, our flower nail, would be over there towards, what is that, 11, maybe like 10 o'clock, right? 10, maybe like more like 10:30, right? So it's in the middle between 9 and 12. And then we're going to pull, instead of straight back like we normally would, a little bit at an angle to kind of mimic this. Give that nail a rotate, pull it back, and then finish it by pulling it across that same angle, which this time would kind of be like 1:30, right? And that should give us a nice little diamond shape petal. So it should have that nice kind of V out and then a soft kind of curve to the top. So it'll be kind of diamond-like instead of being just our normal kind of round teardrop shape that has more of that just kind of semicircle on the end. So the petals are pretty simple. We're just going to do 5 of them. They'll overlap a little bit, but relatively easy once you kind of get a handle of doing this slightly different pull. The centers are going to be a combination of spikes and lines, and we're also going to do a dot in the middle. So pretty easy. We're going to use our smaller tip, the number 2 with the green, to do spikes, and we're going to do them 2 ways. So we'll pull straight up with some and off to the sides with others, and that's going to give it some dimension and give it that kind of hairy, frilly looking center that a lot of hellebores have. And then for the 3, we're going to do a dot. So a nice little dot there in the center. Finish it off well. It's good practice because it won't be seen. And then we're going to do just little lines over top of it. So I'm just going to start at the bottom and pull up over, and that gives us the look of some of these being kind of closed still and kind of enveloping it. And the dot is really just for support, and when we actually do the centers, I'll go all the way around, but I just wanted to show you that. So we're going to do a series of spikes and this little dot covered with lines to give us the effect of a nice little kind of complex center with a lot of stuff going on, because they often have very frilly, hairy, unusual centers in terms of flowers. So now that we've talked about these separate techniques, let's talk about how we're going to put them all together so we actually make our flowers. So for these hellebore blossoms, we're going to start out by doing our 5 petals first, right? So they're going to be there flat against the surface. Think of it almost like a star, or when you're doing your spacing, think of it like you're making kind of little stickmen. So there's going to be a head, the 2 arms, and the 2 legs. And if you need to or want to, a lot of times I draw on the back of my pieces of parchment paper, so you can still see it when you flip over, and that can kind of help you with the spacing and getting them approximately evenly if you don't have a flower nail that has markings on it. Then once we do those petals, we're going to do a nice little layer of our green spikes. I usually pull them straight out to the sides for the first round. I go in and put in the yellow center, and then I'll go back and fill in with more green spikes and do them at other angles. So some straight up, some 45, some laying flat across. And this gives us the effect of a nice frilly center. You can even use your yellow to do a few larger spikes if you want to and make it extra complex. And then just one small note when we're doing our petals, unlike what I usually do, which is where I pipe one and then I do one kind of right next to it, so I'm starting right on top of that back edge of the petal before, I'm actually going to do a petal and then I'm going to kind of do what seems like backtracking. I'm going to start the next one away from it so that only the end of the petal is overlapping, and that's hopefully going to keep me from getting too much buildup or too much wonky angles where the petals overlap. So it should give me a smooth kind of overlapping motion by starting away. So each time I start a new petal, I'm going to go away from the one that I did before to start the next one, and only the last one will kind of overlap in that sense because there'll already be a petal there. But that should give us enough space to make a nice, beautiful flower that just has a slight cupping to the edges of those petals. So I've got my parchment adhered to my flower nail and I'm ready to start. You can see I did a little quick drawing for myself and flipped it over. So I have an approximate guide on that spacing. My little drawing's not perfect. You can see some of my little pie wedges are bigger than others. So just keep that in mind as you're going. We want to try and make the petals all approximately an even size, but I'm just going to pick one of these open little wedges and use that as my starting point. I'm going to kind of line the angle of the opening of the tip up with that kind of 10-30 position on my clock face. I'm going to start pulling, spin, back, and there. And you can see that gives me a more kind of diamond-like elongated shape to those petals. Now, instead of piping the next one right there to the right of this, I'm going to move over here and start away from it. And this is going to allow me to overlap the beginning portion where you can see the back edge of this petal is cupped up a little more than that leading edge. So it's going to be easier to overlap that part. So I'm going to do the same thing where I make sure I'm lined up at 10-30 now that I've rotated. Diagonal spin, diagonal back, and go like that. And you can see then those line up, they overlap beautifully without there being too much buildup. If I start on this side, it's probably going to make a nice little dent in my petal and give it a weird little kind of wave to it that's not going to look that great. So I'm just going to clean the front of my tip and start again. So same thing, I've just rotated a little bit. I'm going to line that opening up with 10-30, start, pull, spin, and back. And you can see I'm getting a nice look to these. They have a little bit of cupping on that back edge of those petals, and we just want to make sure that we have space for our last one. So if you need to, or want to, or are worried about it, sometimes I'll take a little spatula and I'll just smash that little back edge of that first petal down a tiny bit, and that's going to allow me then to start this one without getting too much of a buildup and kind of making it have this weird little fold in the petal, which I found I get if I don't do that. So I'm going to do the same thing where I line up at 10-30, go, pull my diagonal out and back, and you can see I get a beautiful flower. None of the petals have done anything weird where they're kind of running into each other or making any unusual little bumps or fold in those, but we get that nice little cupping to the edge and that kind of characteristic shape of the petals of a hellebore flower. So now that we've got our petals down, we want to do our centers. And I like to start with my green and just pull spikes out. So start a little bit away from the center and just straight out on each petal. I try to do about 2 or 3. And that gives me a nice basis to start with. Gives me an idea of where my little dot is going to go. In the center, and I like the idea of some of those green ones being underneath it and coming out from underneath it, and that helps to give you that look. Then I'm going to go in, pipe a nice little dot with my yellow, and just gently go over it and pipe those little lines on top. Just start at the bottom of each one, and you can see because we started a little bit away with our green, we're now starting to cover up that gap that we had between the green and the yellow dot. A little line got away from me. and we get a nice complex looking center. And if you want to make it even more wild, just go in and pipe more spikes. So I did some that are straight out. I'll do some that are kind of going along a 45-degree angle. Make some long, some short. Gives it a nice little natural variety. And I'll even do some that are almost coming straight up. And this gives them that nice kind of hairy, natural, frilly looking centers. And there you have a lovely basic hellebore flowers. They, I think, have over 20 different species, so there's a lot of variety to these. You can take this and expand on it and create your own variations. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like more about the cake decorating materials and equipment we use, or just some inspirational videos about cake decorating itself, you can follow us on Insta or YouTube at Cake Decorating School. If you'd like to know more about yearly membership and what it entails, you can go to www.cakedecoratingschool.com for more information. And if you're interested in these products, you can check the links in the description.